In the last 2 decades, what really changed is that companies have to work with customers at this massive digital scale. There's a digital footprint that's almost impossible to track. So if you think about our daily lives, right, we're doing everything online these days, whether it's shopping, working, schooling. And, I found this stat recently from McKinsey, and the estimation is 463 exabytes of data generated a day by 2025. And I had to think through this. I'm like, what's an exabyte, right? That's about 200 DVDs of data every day. So in short, a CDP is there so that you can manage your data, so you can better understand your customer preferences, so that you can create this really personalized experience. And without a robust CDP, you really can't do it at scale.
You are listening to Power Marketing with Kevin Lee. Kevin and his agency Did It have helped thousands of businesses win through superior marketing, as have his books, articles, speaking engagements, and the E-Marketing Association Power Marketing podcasts. Here's Kevin.
I'm super excited to talk to Katrina Wong today, who's at Twilio, but probably not the Twilio that you're thinking of. This is the segment side of Twilio, which is the CDP. So let's start with that, Katrina. Most people know Twilio is sort of a back-end SMS provider platform, but the CDP business is a pretty significant piece of their overall business. So, and it integrates really well with messaging. So what's the CDP elevator pitch that you use?
Thanks, Kevin. Great to be here. Thanks for having me on this episode. So essentially what a customer data platform is, a CDP, is that we help companies eliminate their data silos, and we help them build a unified view of the customer. And this is so that they can engage with their customers in this more data-driven, personalized, and timely way across every channel. So this can be SMS, voice, email, website, mobile applications, you name it. This problem has been around for some time, dating myself a little bit. 20 years ago, when we first put on the first websites, we were already trying to track, customer behavior and understand behavioral data for the first time, but we really didn't have the tools to do so. So in terms of this next generation of technology, it's really how we're differentiated is our massive ability to do this at scale, and the key word, in real time. So think of it this way. CDPs can create what I call golden profiles of your customers, and maybe even track, right, billions of events, such as real-time live streaming and views for like worldwide sports events. That was a recent example. The other thing I'll add is that most companies that work with us benefit from empowering their teams across all of their different departments, whether it's marketing, engineering, product, sales, customer service, and analytics teams, so that they can work with a single source of truth.
That's great. I mean, I'm also dating myself, but, before there were CDPs, there was CRM, right? And there might have even be SFA, Salesforce automation, which sort of grew into CRM. And so it's sort of acronym soup from that perspective. And, it's for the folks who haven't fully embraced movement into this CDP way of thinking. You talked about it being real time, and obviously that's a big differentiator from sort of an old school CRM system. But what else can you accomplish with a robust CDP that you really can't do without one?
When I think about it, I mentioned this earlier, the real-time component, the scale, in the last 2 decades, what really changed is that companies have to work with customers at this massive digital scale. There's a digital footprint that's almost impossible to track. So if you think about our daily lives, right, we're doing everything online these days, whether it's shopping, working, schooling. And, I found this stat recently from McKinsey, and the estimation is 463 exabytes of data generated a day by 2025. And I had to think through this. I'm like, what's an exabyte, right? That's about 200 DVDs of data every day. So in short, a CDP is there so that you can manage your data, so you can better understand your customer preferences, so that you can create this really personalized experience. And without a robust CDP, you really can't do it at scale. And a lot of companies without a CDP are doing this manually. Not everything's automated. They're automating pieces of it. They're kind of piecemealing it together. So in short, right, with a robust CDP, you can collect your data, manage your data for compliance, synthesize that data, and then activate that data.
Right. Well, you mentioned personalization, and it sounds like there's a lot of power in that. And perhaps that's even just table stakes now. I think consumers expect a certain level of personalization. And so I'd love for you to go a little bit more into sort of the power of personalization that you can do with the CDP and how your customers are using that. And even folks who maybe aren't your customers who also have alternative CDPs, which of course aren't as good, how are they using personalization?
Oh yeah, that's key. During the pandemic, there was just an explosion of just online activity, and as a result, there was all this digital competition, right, for the consumer's attention. And we had published a report recently that showed something like 67% survey consumers said they would actually leave a brand if the experience was not personalized, right? So it's certainly harder and harder for us, and the bar is higher for those of us that need to reach consumers digitally. So personalization is definitely one of the top use cases for customers that we work with. Most of it kind of falls on the burden of mobile being that single channel where we spend the most amount of time. So whether it's scrolling through your social feeds or taking care of business like mobile banking, you bet that personalization at the messaging level, at the notification level, right, two-way messaging, all of that is key. And what people are really talking about is that with the digital era, businesses are now fully being judged by their mobile app experience. And if we take that banking example, it's not about the type of in-person experience any longer that you walk into a branch, you're speaking to a shopper. People will bank with local bank, national bank, if the mobile experience is great. And also add, right, companies like, for example, here's a good example, American Express. They're able to present offers through partnerships in a super compelling way, and it's all done through their mobile app.
Yeah, that's a great point, and I'm sure that when you guys were acquired by Twilio, that part of their thinking was, oh well, personalization in SMS is going to be critically important. But I'd love to hear sort of how you guys think about the different push and personalization channels differently. Obviously, you can push out messages via SMS. You can do it within an app. You can do it on a landing page. You can do it via email. And each of those could be personalized. But how should people think about it differently? Because it seems like consumers' expectations are quite different depending on how they're getting personalized.
Great question. The bar is just much higher when you have a live two-way interaction because the context needs to be there and it's expected to be there. So how often are we going back and forth with an agent over chat and you had just provided the information, because even before you get on with a live agent, they're asking you questions, right, via the app, and it's not synced, right? So the bar is certainly high with in real time two-way conversations. With landing pages and more what I refer to as traditional customer journeys, right? Maybe this is via email, for example. You're looking at a static one-way communication. So you get some leeway with getting the context right, over time, right? And, with two-way messaging, it needs to be precise at that right moment. So the bar is high.
Yeah, so that I think goes back to the real-time element, right? So I guess a CRM could handle the non-synchronized messaging because it knows who you are and you're in some database somewhere, and email gets
That's
sent
right.
out slow, right? In comparison to app conversations, which are synchronized and synchronous, which would require a CDP to accomplish. So I think that those are some great
That's right.
examples of where a CDP does things that you couldn't do otherwise. Um, Another thing that's obviously a wave that's taking the digital marketing ecosystem by storm is the sort of first party data wave, where for a long time brands had no connection to their consumers at all, right?
Mhm.
They were like, oh yeah, well, my retailer handles that or whatever. I have no contact with them. And so, but now a combination of sort of the evolution of DTC, but also now the third party cookie depreciation seems to have really changed, the need for first party data. And I'd love to hear how CDPs help solve that.
Yeah, this is a great, very timely, relevant question. And I think as a marketer myself, marketers and anyone else in customer facing roles, we always strive to better understand customers in the spirit of better servicing customers. But the challenge was we didn't really have that right technology to capture customer signals across all these channels, or even at all in the beginning.
Right.
I was just at a CIO summit yesterday presenting on this topic. And in the beginning, we had customer data just at point of sale, and that was it. It was very transactional. Certainly, we've come a long way in terms of how brands are engaging with customers. And when you have a CDP, you not only automate how you capture the data, you do so in a compliant way.
Mm-hmm.
Right? That's one of the main reasons to start using a CDP. I talked about the digital attention and how important, it is to get in front of your customers in a personalized way. So when you have more first-party data that is compliant and captured through a CDP, what that allows you to do is actually build super compelling experiences. And it becomes this flywheel where you get more and more, opt-in data because your customer is like, you know what? The value exchange and what I'm getting in return from the brand is so valuable that I'm, more than happy to engage with you. I have an example, big company, a major retailer, and they were losing $1 million a week from giving up the use of third-party cookies. So some brands have said, okay, we're going to figure out, we're going to jump all in to, being compliant, because being consumer first and privacy first is so important. And they were so pleasantly surprised when they ended up using a CDP, implementing it, working off of just first party data. And they were able to, build 9 more, right, mobile apps that kind of capture the audience. And this resulted in not only recouping the savings, but a lift in their overall ROI.
Yeah, that's certainly a powerful case study. And I would imagine that the bigger the marketer, the more compelling the numbers are, but there are probably also bigger marketers and mid-sized marketers who are late to the CDP party, right? Either they're big and they move slow, or they're mid-sized and it just wasn't a priority yet. So if people are late to the CDP party, but they're basically saying like, okay, I'm starting to talk, I'm talking to Katrina's team, I'm talking to other teams, like what gets them off the fence? Like, what's the catalytic aha moment where they're like, oh, now I get it. This is why I need to move fast and implement the CDP.
Well, as marketers, we all wish that we wouldn't have to spend so much on advertising, but I think it's the ability to get a return on your ad spend. ROAS, right? Return on your ad spend. So social networks continue to be the single place that gets the most eyeballs. So as a result, consumer marketers are spending millions and millions advertising on social networks. And guess what? We when we work with some of the largest brands out there, some of these companies are seeing a 40 to 60% reduction in their CAC, customer acquisition costs. This translates to literally millions and millions of dollars for these companies, because that's how much spend is deployed across social media advertising.
Yeah, well, that's a great point. And obviously, it's proportional to the size of the marketer and the sizes of their spend. So that should certainly be a wake up call to a lot of marketers. But of course, some marketers may have made a bad decision and picked the CDP that doesn't really meet their needs. And I think about the pain of changing, for example, CRM providers. It's pretty painful, or the pain of changing email service providers. That's pretty painful. So what's involved if they made a bad decision in changing your CDP? What does that process look like? Is it impossible to change your CDP if you make the wrong choice?
No. So, having been in the industry for about 20 years and having worked for CRM systems, right, up until this point, right, most of our applications are applications with a lot of business logic, housed in the cloud. Guess what? API first platforms and CDPs is the way to go, because there isn't that vendor lock-in, right? And when you think about a CDP, what's really, really important is that customer record. I refer to it as our golden profile. Guess what? That's supposed to be portable. So in other words, we move it right to where you need. Maybe it's downstream in your marketing stack to activate it, or in your data stack, your data warehouse of choice, right? So that your data teams can, work off of that record, build propensity to buy scoring, whatever it might be. But the key to the right type of CDP is that it's an open system, right? We give you building blocks so that you can connect to it, right? So it's easy to actually switch in to our CDP infrastructure or upgrade to us. And, to make it easy, we have, 400 pre-built connectors. So think of it as a low-code way to connect all of your data, manage your data, and activate your data.
Well, that should certainly alleviate a lot of folks' anxiety around pulling the trigger on a CDP. One area of marketers that I think simultaneously is sometimes at the bleeding edge and sometimes running like 10 years behind are political marketing and nonprofit fundraising. So is that sector, are those two sectors becoming more active in using CDPs, or are they still lagging behind?
Probably a little early, although I do think nonprofits, is a sector that we sell into, or oftentimes, help give away our product in many ways. I think, if the question is, should they be using a CDP? I definitely think so. And here's why. I was part of an analytics startup during the 2012 elections, where we worked very closely with Facebook to understand if social sentiment was a proxy for voting. Like, is that the new polling? Do polls even work now? We didn't have CDPs back then, but I definitely think that CDPs will help you understand your audience better, and more importantly, in this compliant way, which I think is really important when it comes to, political marketing. So it's just the right way and a better practice if we could do that in that realm.
Well, it'll be fascinating to watch for the upcoming presidential elections, which, I still think of them as far away, but they seem to be the news almost daily. So it'll be interesting to see what the PACs do, what the parties do, and what the candidates do as it relates to personalization and engaging, with CDPs in an interesting way. So I'll certainly be watching it pretty carefully. As far as mistakes that folks make, or missed opportunities that marketers should be aware of, are there any things that you sort of see where people have missed an opportunity, either because they implemented a CDP wrong, or they left something out, or they just, there's just a sort of opportunity costs are sometimes the hardest to measure, but when they happen, they can be pretty big. So any thoughts there?
Yeah, here's some gotchas. I mean, I think CDPs are pretty hot space right now. It's, it's been around, but it's still pretty new. And just like when we saw account-based marketing and that category being born, all of a sudden there were so many tools that coined themselves to be ABM. So we're definitely seeing that happen in the CDP space as well. So top capabilities I think you should look for when evaluating a CDP is it truly data first or a data up CDP? And here's what I mean. Does the solution itself start with a data foundation? Do you understand, the data infrastructure, the data architecture that actually drives how effective a CDP is versus, what you see in a UI and the bells and whistles and it being kind of featured down, which is a lot of applications out there. Is it an open platform? And here's why that matters the most. We believe that the mission of a CDP is to democratize data so that you can access and activate it across your entire ecosystem, across all of your different stacks, across your different teams. And I think a big mistake that companies get into is a situation where they buy a CDP and then there's still a vendor lock-in, right? And that's a very thing that a CDP is looking to dissolve, that data silo. So then you put in a CDP as a big cloud suite of some sort and it's walled garden, and all you do is kind of manage data all within that system, and you have to move stuff into that system only. So in fact, you've become yet another data silo. So what we're out there evangelizing is the opposite, right? Democratizing data. You don't have to build custom connectors, right? That's pretty expensive. We have 400 out of the box, right? So look at how extensible it is, how open it is. Is it an API first platform? And that's where you're going to get the biggest gains with the CDP.
That's a really good point. I have a sort of a follow-up question because, certainly marketers come from various different directions as to like their formal education or their particular aptitudes. And so you've got some marketers who sort of come through creative, and they may be, math phobic or data phobic. And so they're sort of used to knowing, what emotional messaging resonates. And so they're really all about messaging and strategy. And they're a little bit data phobic. So if they're coming at this challenge of, should I pull the trigger on a CDP, but they're not sort of hyper analytic, right? How should they, either arm themselves with the right team members or sort of, work with advisors so that they don't, make a mistake, or just to sort of be less fearful? I mean, often the fear is unwarranted, but any thoughts for sort of when you talk to marketers who sort of think of themselves more as sort of the big idea and creative marketers, and
yes.
They're uncomfortable talking about data and math.
Yes. Well, the intersection of, right, like creative, brand messaging, right, all of that, and technology, all of that is expressed across channels. So these days, CMOs will have typically a technical team that supports, at a minimum, your website. And generally, right, also all of your other channels, right? So there are technical teams. This is why it's like literally the best time to be in marketing. You have technical teams in place that can actually help you enable technology, whether CDP or anything else in your marketing stack. So that's who you tap into, right? And down to, saying to the technical team, I'm looking to better understand behavioral data. And there's something called a CDP, Customer Data Platform, where it will allow us to instrument, right, the events that we're curious in learning more on our website. Like, you can just simply start there. That would be my recommendation.
Great. And a final question really is, so that when a person's pulled the trigger and they feel like there's this sort of Pandora's box of all this great stuff they can do with the CDP, and they feel like, okay, the handcuffs are off, I can do anything, right? Mm-hmm. How should they think about prioritizing, right? Because they have apps, they have SMS, they have email, they've got, dynamic creation of content on their landing pages because, their CMS supports it, maybe. So any thoughts on sort of how your team advises them to sort of prioritize things? Because you can't launch everything at once, right? So
absolutely, you cannot boil the ocean. And, that's actually one of the challenges, a good problem to have when you have a CDP. You're like, oh, I can do this, and that, right? And I think for most marketers, there's a point of view in terms of what those delightful moments are for their target audience. I would say start there, right? And perhaps in today's, kind of climate, if cost savings and efficiencies is, what you want to work toward, then it is about, figuring out which channels you want to optimize. And you can actually, look at the data that comes in through the CDP once you have it live, and you can do, channel optimization. So it just kind of depends on your priorities. But, at a kind of a, large scale, advice would be, figure out the delightful moments for your customers. You probably have a point of view, and I would start there.
Yeah, that's a great point. So quick follow-up question on that. And obviously, CDPs can really empower you to spend marketing dollars more efficiently, and we talked about that earlier. But another thing that CDPs seem like they could really do well is squeeze more juice out of the existing customer base, right? And delight those existing customers. And if, in fact, 2023 might be a recessionary year and marketers are forced to cut spend for new customer acquisition, what are some ways they can deploy their CDP to make sure that they get greater LTV out of their existing customers?
Love the question, because I think as we move into 2023, the burden is actually on marketers to figure out the equation that businesses are, this new equation of success for businesses. CAC needs to be less than LTV, right? So you can either drop your costs, right? But really what we're seeing with a lot of our customers is this new focus, increased focus, renewed focus on customer loyalty so that you can up your lifetime value. It's about the cross sells, it's about the upsells, it's about that continued engagement. And with that, you need context, right? And you need to understand your customer and know your customer in a very authentic way. Yeah, so that's how a CDP could help.
Great. Well, those are all really great tips, and I look forward to continuing to watch you guys innovate in the CDP space. And so thanks so much for joining me.
Thank you, Kevin. Thanks for having me on.
Kevin Lee's Power Marketing is available on all your favorite podcast networks. Kevin loves helping businesses excel at marketing. Having marketing challenges? Just like Santa in The Miracle on 34th Street, if Kevin can't help you, he'll know someone who can. Find him on LinkedIn, subscribe, or follow.